Welcome to Automation's official design competition. In this video, you are joining us for the roundtable discussion of the finalist designs in category E, the 1965 to 1985 race car. Your hosts Chris and Rob are joined by today's very special guest and judge Sam Moores. Sam is a well-established car photographer, the host of the Car Chat podcast, an Instagram personality, an amateur race car driver, and an all-round car fanatic. We'll start by asking our guest judge a few questions first, and then we'll dive into a more in-depth analysis of each finalist in an open roundtable format.
Okay, so today we're going to start off with a bit of an interview and a Q&A session with you, Sam. Just talk about what you get up to, what your online presence is all about.
So my name's Sam Moores. I am a car person. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. I don't know. I do a lot of different things. Photography, I do some YouTube videos. I have a podcast that's what I spend most of my time doing at the moment. Generally involved in the car world. I've owned some nice cars, do a bit of racing. Yeah, that's about it really, I think. A bit of everything.
Fantastic. And for anybody who's going to be watching the video, we'll be posting links to Sam's podcast and his Instagram channel in the description below. So by all means, go and follow his channel and listen to his podcasts. I'm quite a fan of them myself, actually. He does really good work.
Nice. Well, I don't actually listen to them, funnily enough, yeah, but I very much enjoy creating them. In fact, I don't know, I might as well talk about it. I think, so I've done a lot of various bits of pieces, of whether it's video and photography over the years and stuff. And then I realized that I just love talking to people about, not necessarily about cars, but cars is a great medium to talk to interesting people. And in this space, I get to meet so many different types of person and personality through all of it. And that's why I love the podcast, because it's just a sit down with someone that you've got a shared interest with and a bit of a dig into their life and what makes them tick, and then veer off into all sorts of different topics and whatever. But it's fun, and they're long, which is good.
Yeah, you've had some pretty diverse guests on your podcast over the years. I've been going through the archive more and more. It's just a great thing to throw on while I'm doing work and just listen to you chatting with just the most interesting personalities throughout, not just through the automotive industry, but other social media types, drivers, just a very wide array of very interesting people.
Yeah, it's someone asked me how I choose my guests recently, and it's basically what's my fascination. Like, who do I find interesting, or is there a topic that I find interesting and I can get someone to talk about that topic, or find the right person, and then there is a slight caveat of, will they do the interview? Because that's a huge part of it. There's loads of people I want to talk to, but getting them on my podcast is impossible. But it's basically, and that's how it's sort of evolving over time. It started off with just who I could get access to. So some of my friends who are in the YouTube space. And then I realized that I'd done all of them, and I had done about 5 podcasts, and I just sort of committed to one a week. So you're like, oh, okay, hang on. And then so I started doing some racing drivers that I met. And it sort of snowballed, and I'm trying to make it as wide as possible. And then at some point, I'm going to start doing stuff that's not just cars. I know it's called the Car Chat podcast, but it's sort of my podcast. So I don't know whether it's watches or something, engineering items, or possibly game design or whatever, like all sorts of things that if I find them interesting, maybe other people will find them interesting and get the right people. It's all about the people.
Absolutely. And talking with people that you find interesting, that definitely makes a job not really even feel much like a job, does it?
Yeah, it's like it works two ways, because often these people, I've not necessarily met them, and you don't know what they're going to be like. Some people are very similar to their online persona. If they've got a YouTube channel or something, they're very similar. But then sometimes I'm dealing with people that are not online. Maybe they're a bit older and they don't, on camera all the time. Maybe they've started a company or a business. And so I used to really stress about how long we'd done the podcast for. So when I hit record on my thing over here, it tells me how long we've been recording for. And then I was aiming for an hour plus, and until I got to an hour, I was like pretty edgy, pretty stressed. And now I've realized that like, whatever, I can talk to someone for a long time, or I can talk to someone for 10 minutes. And if there's someone that you're only going to talk to for 10 minutes, just end the recording and put it in the bin. But I don't actually do that. But some people are just, it's like pulling blood out of a stone. But often the interview might seem like dead for like 45 minutes. And then you'll find one little nugget that gets them, and you see their eyes like light up, and you're like, oh, here we go. And then you can go off and end up talking about all whatsoever. But it's massively varies guest by guest.
Oh, absolutely.
It's quite.
And it is very, of course, it's critical to find that one little nugget that you can just, you or the guest can just latch onto and just go from there for sure. And that's maybe what makes the show interesting, because you can actually kind of hear that in progress as you're talking to people. So that you can you hear the spark, and then it just goes from there, and it's really quite fun.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's been a really interesting learning experience, like making the podcasts and trying to develop as an interviewer. And I think I'm getting better, but now I don't know what we've done, 150, something like that. 150.
Yeah,
1 to 2 hour interviews, which is quite a few, but just trying to sort of work out what is better. And I do a reasonable amount of planning and research but it's a lot. Generally, I try and find someone or a topic that I know a reasonable amount or I'm interested in, so the research isn't so hard. But I was talking to Justin Bell. He was actually on an episode that we've recorded but not published yet, and spent a lot of time interviewing people, and I asked him about it, and he's like, well, basically you need an in point and you need an out point, like where you want to start, where you want to get to, and then you need to listen in the middle. And that is something I've massively found, like just listen to what people are saying and then react to what they're saying, because you can just be like someone trolling me in the background. Like I have all this stuff up and I'm like, okay, I need to get to this point, 3.4 or whatever, and you can just miss the whole thing and lose the conversation. But yeah,
You can lose the crumbs along the way by just focusing on one point too much, and you missed all the opportunities along the way then. And opportunities there always will be when talking to interesting people, so yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So we were talking about the podcast and how you're sort of looking to branch out into other areas. Tell us a little bit more about that and any other kind of interesting projects you have in the works.
Yeah, at the moment it's I'm really focusing on the people I work with who support the podcast, and trying to sort of push to do more stuff with them. So we've got some things in the pipelines in the background that we're trying to do, and for me it's linking all of the things I do. So it's how can I integrate photography, maybe some video. I kind of would only rather do video if I'm driving something cool. So if I'm driving something cool, I'll make a video. I'm not going to make a video if I'm not. But trying to link the sort of photography and the podcast and all of it, and meeting people and just slowly putting it all together over time, that's where I'm really focused at the moment. And a lot of it is the sort of business side of the podcast, which is really important because ultimately, yes, I really enjoy it, but it does sort of have to make sense at some point in time. Otherwise, family get a bit annoyed that I'm just sitting chatting to people all day long and there's nothing coming out of it. But it's the way, as the podcast gets bigger, you get bigger opportunities, which works financially, but also I get to meet more interesting people. Not saying more interesting people, but notable people, or I get access. People, I've been knocking on someone's door for 2 years, and then this happened this week. And then finally they turn around and go, yeah, okay, I'll do it. And you're like, yes. But so that's it really, just sort of pushing that sort of stuff forward. And I want to do a bit more fun driving, more road trips, just generally have fun and enjoy what I'm doing. But pushing it forward at the same time, growing the audience and all that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. And that is such a big win when you finally, you're talking to someone notable and they finally say, yes, I agree to be on your show or participate in your event. That's a great feeling, isn't it?
It's such a great feeling. And it's not only a great feeling because you're like, for me, it's like, I really want to have a chat with these people and sit down with someone and talk for 2 hours. You feel like you know them a reasonable amount of what you can gather in 2 hours. And then I had this real disconnect, which was quite funny. I didn't know whether when I saw them in person, it would clock who I was and remember. I don't know why. Because if I've sat down with someone for 2 hours, I definitely remember who they are. And I can't remember who it was. It was someone like Henry Catchpole. And I saw him and he was like, "Oh, hi Sam, how you doing?" I was like, "Oh, yes, okay, fine." Like, they do remember.
So I guess sort of the nugget of this whole thing is, how did you get interested in cars in the first place? Where did it all kind of begin for you, for lack of a better way of putting it?
Super late. I'd always been interested in the sort of background in cars, but like my family weren't really into cars. My dad wasn't like massively into cars. He liked cars a little bit. He had a 911 at one point when I was growing up, and then swapped it for like a family people carrier. Which is not that cool, but I get why he did it now. And then went to uni, studied engineering. All this sort of time had started taking up photography, but wasn't necessarily studying it, just like taking photos and making photos. I guess there's a slight difference. But and then I did a lot of skiing. I was a ski instructor for a bit, and during all that, I did a lot of skiing with a guy called Tim Burton, who is also known as Shmee150.
Okay.
Big YouTube profile. So we've been like best mates for a long time, and we started making videos of us skiing, a bit like skate videos back in the day, sort of ski videos, short edits, messing around with cameras. That was when I started learning how to edit and using Premiere and After Effects, and we were really bad at skiing, so I tried to make the edits as cool as possible, like, really trick transitions and whatever. So that, and then I started taking photos of us going over a ski jump or whatever. Realized I'd got loads of photos of everyone else and none of me, ever. I never got any cool photos of myself. So that was when I sort of started progressing, I think, in photography, trying to get cool photos. Then Tim started doing car events, filming his YouTube videos and stuff. I started going along, taking some photos, and my sort of depth into the car world. At that point in time, when I started off, I'd be like, that's a Lamborghini, that's a Ferrari. That was the sort of level of knowledge I had, really, to be honest. Didn't really follow Formula One, didn't really follow any racing. And then it's just gone since then. And I'm constantly learning and picking up more information and just about each era and each type of car, and got quite heavy into Porsches and how that sort of can of worms. And yeah, it's got a bit out of hand, I would say. Now I have a podcast talking about cars, so yeah, I don't know. I find them interesting. I find the people interesting. And yeah, there we are.
And that's kind of the fun thing about talking about cars is you're always going to run into somebody who just has the most unbelievable wealth of knowledge about one particular car. And even if it's not, I've been into cars for quite a while myself. Even if it's a kind of car you're not really interested in, you're always going to find somebody who's just absolutely fascinating to listen to, and just be able to pick their brain for, well, in some cases, I could just sit down and talk to some of these people all day long and hear them talk about their stories and their experiences and knowledge. It's really just incredible how just the breadth of knowledge that some people have in this field. And it's really great experiencing that, I find.
Absolutely. I think that is that's one of my favorite things, I think, actually. If I go to a car event, or I started going to these Peter Auto events that we have in Europe, so like classic racing events of cars that used to go to Le Mans and stuff, between, I don't know what it is, 50s to 2010. And one of the guys that I used to go with, his dad had been a mechanic on a bunch of cars for like 50 years or something. And you'd walk around the paddock of all these eras of cars that I know absolutely nothing about. And he'd just give you nuggets of information about each car. And I've been at car events with people that are similar, and you're like, I'm looking at some, I don't know, old thing. Like, yeah, that car is chain driven. Like, what? Like, yeah, it's got a fixed rear axle and it drifts everywhere. Like, what? What are you talking about? Oh, it's a Fraser Nash. Like, oh, okay. Oh, I'm interested now. Tell me more about this mental old car. And then that's it. I think the obvious stuff is a bit boring. Mm-hmm. And the more you get involved in it, the more stuff kind of becomes obvious and whatever. So you need to go down your niche. And it's how you end up as like full-on weirdo anorak on some topic, that if someone gets you in the right thing, I think the ability to not go full anorak is very useful. But with the right people, you're like, oh yeah, talking about certain model codes and between years changes in a headlight, and then why this one's better than that or whatever. It's fun. It's fun. But it's like you said, meeting those people, I think is one of the best parts. It's just finding new stuff.
I guess the tie-in with this is, we're gonna maybe touch a little bit on your car history and sort of the highlights and lowlights of what you've done and driven, and what you like to own and what you'd maybe like to own.
Yeah. Okay. I'll run you through a sort of small history. I didn't start driving until I was 21, 22, so really late. And I had a little A3. That was my first car, quite a nice first car actually. And then a few people around me were getting some sports cars and stuff, and I ended up getting a Boxster 981. That was my first sort of sports car, and that started me down this Porsche route of going like, oh, hang on a minute. And I started going on road trips and taking photos and coming across all sorts of different manufacturers. And on the road trips, generally, the Porsches just worked. People in the Porsches were having the most fun because their luggage was in the car. They weren't worried about it not fitting. The cars just seemed to work. I just really started to gel with the brand at that point in time. And then I went, and quite a big jump actually, but at the time, financially, it wasn't a massive jump, but in terms of car, I got a 997.2 RS about 2012. So yeah, GT3 RS Porsche manual one.
Nice.
And that, and at the time, I remember seeing these videos of Chris Harris comparing a 458 and a GT3 RS, and like, I think one of the clips was like one of them going through a corner sideways and one not, or whatever. Anyway, it really got to me. And then I basically lucked out in cars, because that's one of the best cars ever made. And I didn't know that before having it. I'd not driven lots of different stuff. But since, it's actually probably stopped me buying a lot of cars in the interim, because I always come back to that car and go, yeah, but this is pretty awesome. So I still own that car. I've had it for, I don't know, 9 years. What came after? I'm trying to think what came after. Then it became a point of not a replacement, but additions. So for garage space I did not have. I'm sure lots of people appreciate this. You just sort of buy things and then work out later where you're going to put it. But yeah, so I've been a few different things. Bought a backdated 911. I don't know quite where the timeline is on this. And a backdated 78 SC that I've still got. I love. Don't drive it so much at the moment, but mainly because I've got nowhere to put it. But that was my sort of starting to go into older cars, but ideally one that ran and whatever. And at the same time, I was taking pictures of all these cool RSRs and stuff racing around. And really started diving down that one. And then in 2015, I bought an F40, so went quite extreme. Which was an interesting story. It's on my YouTube channel, and I've talked about it on the podcast and whatever. But basically, bought this car. It needed a lot of work. Tons of work doing to it, but it was white. It had a weird body kit on it. Had some different parts and whatever. we sent it back to Italy, had it basically put back to stock, but I changed the colour to blue. Car became a little bit infamous. Mixed reactions from different people about sort of some really weird Ferrari purists who were like, it should be red, blah, blah, blah. I don't think I've met anyone that might be a sort of an actual owner or like a real person that thought that. They saw it and they were like, yeah, that's quite cool. Like, maybe it should be red, but it is quite cool. They sold that a year and a half ago, and weirdly, actually, it's up for sale at the moment. The new buyer has put it up for sale. He's clearing out a few, like a tiny proportion of his unreal collection. So you had a F40, which is like, that's kind of, I think most people's like apex car, or a lot of people, definitely a lot of people on the podcast. Drove it, not tons. It's not the sort of car that you drive a lot. You get in it, you drive it for about half an hour, and you're like, I'm glad I didn't put it into a hedge, a ditch, backwards or something. It was a lot of fun. My heart rate is going, but thank you very much. Amazing experience to own, drive. Ultimately, having a car of that value, and it was going up in value at the same time, which is great. No sob story there. But driving a car of the value that it got to did start to stress me out, and the fact that the paint's all kind of like perfect, and you scratch it, it's like a full respray, all that sort of stuff. Leave it on the street, someone reverses into it. There was a lot more stress in owning the car than enjoyment by the end. So I moved that on. That went into a bunch of Ferraris. Bit of a mad year. Somehow get out of that without losing any money, which was crazy. And had a Lusso, a GT4 Lusso. This is when I found out I was having a baby. So I was like, oh yeah, that'll be a practical car. It's not a practical car, but it does have 4 seats, which was awesome, but didn't really gel with. I don't really gel with Ferraris like I gel with Porsches. I don't know why. Some sort of personal image thing. I don't know why not. So now I've got a GTS 991.2 GTS. That's my sort of daily-ish. Got a little EV. Some point in this middle of all this, I started racing. I wanted to race something that felt different to my road cars, and at the time I had my GT3 RS, and I wanted to drive something that gave me a different experience. So I thought about doing Caterhams, but they're not like, they're awesome. I genuinely love Caterhams, but it wasn't a different sort of experience really from a fast road car. So I started getting into the prototype stuff. So I got the baby Radical. I don't know whether you've come across Radicals. They do a car called the SR1, which is like 180 horsepower, about 500 kilos, 30 kilos, something like that. A bit of downforce, not crazy, but a bit of downforce, stuff like that. Raced that for 2 years, had some big accidents, some my fault, some not my fault. A lot of learning about car setup and brake bias. And that particular car, you could never get the fronts to lock for the rears. So in most cars, you slam, and driving a car today in the wet, if you slam on the brakes, the fronts will lock the rears. So you will just go in a straight line.
Yep.
In this car, if you slammed on the brakes, it would lock the rears, which is like pulling the handbrake. It immediately spins you round. So I had one big accident at Brands Hatch, quite serious, into a wall. That I think was the end of that car. But I decided, rather than continue with SR1s and do something different, I decided to go for a faster car because that would be safer. That was my logic. So I got an SR3, which is like the next car up. 250 horsepower, similar sort of weight, proper slicks and wings, downforce, like serious downforce kind of situation. And I've raced that a bit, and then done some endurance racing and some cheap stuff and some MX-5s and all sorts of things. So yeah, a bit of experience in all sorts of different cars, do the old track day and whatnot, but lean towards, if I can drive someone else's car, perfect. If not, I'd rather drive a race or track prepped car, so that if it goes in the gravel, It's not the end of the world. I wouldn't want to put a car with a nice shiny paint job into the gravel or a wall. Like, it's not a good day.
So I guess the next question, we're going to get a little bit more into sort of the what you like about automotive design, and that is, what cars and what kind of cars and eras of cars do you find yourself most interested in and drawn towards these days?
That is a really good question. I think it's split a lot these days. I think a car has to have a purpose. I think that's a really key point. It has to have a purpose, whether it's it can be a race car, a road car, or whatever, but it's got to align. I think the design and the look and everything has to align for that purpose. So I do struggle with like a big SUV that's got 800 horsepower, like a new Aston Martin DBX 707, or the new Lambo whatever, or the Ferrari SUV that they don't want to call an SUV, because it doesn't actually align that well with anything. It's like, oh, it can set a Nürburgring lap time and carry 5 people and some luggage. Yeah, great, cool. Like, there's no use to that. I love like a wagon. A wagon makes sense. And if something needs to be raised up to go off road, perfect. But it should be raised up, and you're compromising on the efficiency and whatever because it's going off road. When things don't line up. So I think that, in terms of, for me, as like aesthetic shapes and stuff, it needs to be a purity of design, one continuous flow through the car. It's so difficult looking at older stuff, especially because there's just so many awesome things out there that you're like, oh yeah, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool. Generally organic shapes, I think. I used to be massively into just organic flowy shapes, and then now my perspective is changing a little bit. I'm like, oh, I quite like boxy stuff, like 70s, 80s boxy stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's becoming cool again. And I think it's because back then, not that I was really looking at cars when I was like -7 years old, but when cars were all boxy, if you had a flowing shape, it stood out. Whereas now, all cars are like some sort of egg situation, and if you put a boxy car right next to it, everyone's like, whoa, what's that? Like, it stands out. So there's definitely something about that contrast between what everyday vehicles look like and what the vehicle that you're looking at looks like. If there's a mismatch, it does create some interest. Yeah,
absolutely, it does.
Tricky. And I just bloody love Porsches as well.
They are very special cars, for sure.
And not very boxy either.
No, not boxy at all. Unless you got a slant nose, then it's a bit more boxy.
Yeah. That's as boxy as they ever got, though, I think.
Yeah, it is.
And even then, like, it's still quite smooth at the back.
Mm-hmm. So my next question is, this is maybe a kind of a difficult question to answer, is, looking at everything that's changing in the automotive world, and actually, it's as we were talking with a couple of our other guests we've had on, it's not really so much the automotive world as much as you call it the mobility world. What do you think sort of the next trends in design are for cars going into the future?
Ooh. Well, I think the trend we're seeing at the moment that's happening in terms of design, from an exterior point of view, we're starting to see it's all to do with efficiency. So these really like flowing, like closed off vents, ideally no wing mirrors. I hate digital wing mirrors, they're awful. But, and I think actually Mercedes did a study recently on their, what's their car called? Something XX concept.
Yeah, the EQXX.
EQXX, they did like 1,000 miles. I think that has normal wing mirrors. And they did a study on the power used to operate the video camera plus the screens running full time versus a great shaped wing mirror, and it was more efficient to just have normal wing mirrors. That may not be true forever, but it was. I rated that as the fact that they'd looked into that. But so I think we're going to see lots of like really kind of dull, eggy shaped things appear, but hopefully somewhere. Once we get, maybe when electric cars become more efficient and we're not so worried about how efficient they are, if they do all the required stuff with spare capacity, then maybe we'll start getting some cool design in there. And then on interior cars, I think with automation, we're going to see a huge change. Like current luxury cars of today are going to look like a joke in comparison to probably 20 years time, maybe. I don't know where we're going to be, but like if you don't need a driver, then a car can be completely changed in how you lay it out. You just remove all of the stuff in it pretty much. And then you've got like a lounge, you've got some sort of sitting space that's a living space. And then I think we'll see some really cool designs. I like how things with the, what was it, the Hyundai, what's it called? I can't remember what it's called. Ioniq 5, how the front seats go like full recline. So you can lie down and have a sleep if you want. I think they might even spin around, I'm not sure, when you're charging. I like this sort of, I like interesting, relevant design choices, not when someone's taken something and gone, I'm trying to make an impact out of that. I want there to be a reason why they've done it, and that's the first. And I think EVs we're starting to see that a little bit with different manufacturers, that they don't have all this heritage that they're trying to bung into a new EV. They're just going, right, electric cars do not have to be the same. The stuff doesn't necessarily have to be in the same place. So maybe we can have different storage options, like we've got trunks and things in cars and more space and doors opening in different ways and stuff. Like, I really like all these different design elements. Sports cars are all becoming one and the same. So I don't know where we're going to go with that, but I guess everything's probably it may not go electric. We might get hybrids or hydrogen or something else. So I don't know about that side of it, but yeah, on exterior and interior, those are the sort of things I'm interested to see develop.
I think kind of an extension to that, I had a discussion with a couple of friends over the weekend actually about sort of the design of cars, that it really does feel like that nowadays, kind of the democratization of like a really good car design. You know, it used to be that if you wanted a really spectacular design, that was reserved for the really high-end cars. And you know, your average everyday car was just a 2 or 3 box sedan or hatchback. And nowadays, you know, you mentioned the Hyundai Ioniq 5. I mean, that's a spectacular design, and it's a completely attainable car for, you know, near anybody almost. And it seems like that if you want the really spectacular designs, they're down in the lower end of and sort of the attainable cars, and sort of the really high end cars are kind of, sometimes it feels like they're going off into the weeds a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think when you look at things like, okay, let's pick some obvious targets, large ones. Let's say BMW. Conventionally, cool design, whatever. And now we've got all these crazy, their designs just don't necessarily feel super resolved, whether it was like the M3 and stuff like that. I think they're probably aging better than when they came out. But I saw the new iX and the is it the iXM? Or no, it's just the XM the other day. And like, just a monstrous, horrible kind of thing. I can see where the design language is going with these kind of like boxy side shapes and stuff. But when you look at brands like Kia, Hyundai, like, they're making cars at a great price point with great design. And you get, like, I have a Peugeot E208 that's my sort of around town little EV. And the interior on that, really nice. They've got really great use of materials. Like, they're using different stuff. The dash is like, it's very nicely designed. Same with things like the Honda E. Like, you get in and you're like, whoa, they've done something completely different. And I don't think you get in a new Mercedes and go, whoa, they've done something completely different. It's like, whoa, they put a massive screen in it. Cool. Now it's more of the same. And the exterior design is just more of the same. But these other brands that have come in, I guess they have an opportunity to define their new style. And like, I really like what Polestar's doing at the moment. Really cool designs. I think the typical old school sort of, everyone used to get cars from Germany. In the UK, it would be like, which German manufacturer are you buying a car from? That was it. If you like had got some money and you were going to get a nice car, it was a German car. Whereas now, I think that's all being thrown out, especially with the EVs, because they're not necessarily the best or anything. And we're seeing such amazing design from other manufacturers. So yeah, I think you're spot on. Like, the bottom end is actually really interesting at the moment. And I think one of the ones on the mobility choice is we might start seeing, and we definitely will start seeing, really small vehicles that have like space for 2 people and a tiny bit of luggage, but you can park in a space the wrong way around, like just drive in sideways, and they have like solar on the roof and really neat storage solutions. I'm really looking forward to seeing how those develop.
Oh, for sure. And those small cars are always, I mean, they really do make sense when you think about it. I mean, Rob is a prime example of that. He's got a little Renault Twingo.
Yeah, 2001. It was my first car, and now my now car again after moving back to Sweden from New Zealand, where it waited for me, standing in a garage for many years. And it's fantastic how such an old car can, a little outdated car still can give you so much joy driving. It's just the steering is so responsive and connected with the throttle response is excellent and everything. That's not what you would expect when just looking at the Twingo, but that's what you get from little older designs there. It's amazing.
It's definitely something I've noticed that a lot of people tend, when they're buying their cars, they tend to think of like the one sort of worst case or extreme case, when they're buying it. It's like, well, especially like, I mean, I live in Canada here, and specifically in probably the biggest pickup truck capital, maybe even bigger than the United States in a lot of places. And you're always hearing of people saying, "Oh, I need a pickup truck," and they're always thinking of the one day a year when they're towing their great big trailer out for a long weekend to go out and enjoy the scenery. They don't think about the other 364 days a year when you got this, 8-meter long pickup truck that's 2.5 meters high, and you're trying to commute downtown and park in underground parkades, and
it's really true. It's really true. I think you're spot on. I guess a tricky bit is with all of that, isn't it? It's a large purchase for anyone, a car, and people want to get one car. But like, if I get one car, then that's it. But it needs to do everything.
So I think that basically covers all the interview questions I had. That was actually a really fantastic interview. Very informative.
Yeah. It's almost like you've done that before, Sam.
Good questions. Good questions.
Oh, thank you. So how about we go look at some cars then?
Absolutely. Instantly, I like the color. Like, it very sort of fits with the era I think they're aiming for. And I can see sort of, I feel like I can see what's going on in this person's head. And then for me, it starts to slightly fall apart a bit, to be honest. It's a nice flowing organic shape, and then it starts getting boxy. And there's this mix of the two that it doesn't quite, it just seems to like not quite gel for me. But yeah, there's one of the things I found about like all of them is the level of detail. Now, I've not played with the software that they're using to build it, but the level of detail people have gone to and is incredible. I'm incredibly impressed with like all of them to start off with, and then it just comes down to personal this and that. But yeah, there's something about this car that it doesn't quite match together for me. Things like the exhaust, the way it comes out, sticks out really far. Doesn't seem like that would happen in a real car. That sort of thing. Those are my thoughts.
And I would like to throw in there, I think part of your observation there could be explained by the extremely random assortment of tail and headlights. that all have different styles, and nothing really seems to quite fit together with this one in terms of lighting. And also, one thing that I found supremely funny is the massive exhaust sticking out of the front, and then the massive scoops sucking in air towards the trunk. What are you cooling back there, mate?
I didn't clock that, but that makes perfect sense. And then if you look just behind the exhaust, there's an intake.
That's the fart venting system.
It's to get that hot air into your legs. That's what's happening.
Oh, right, yeah, the flames. The spouting flames.
Yeah,
there's a bit of a mismatch.
Generally kind of my thoughts as well, is that the one thing that I thought was the side exhausts are really, really cool. I like the idea, but it probably could have been implemented just a little bit better. I mean, the way, how far they stick out, this is the kind of car that if you're racing it wheel to wheel with another one, if they just happen to bump you in the wrong spot, well, guess what? They just pinched your exhaust completely shut, and now you've got a problem.
They have. Maybe you can melt their car whilst you're driving alongside them.
Yeah, just let off the gas and get a little bit of after flames.
Yeah, exactly.
Melt the paint off a little. I do like the color, though. It's very suitable for a car like this. I do question, though, I mean, this is a 1965 to 1985 design window. I do think this is maybe a little bit too early. Like, I'm thinking more early 60s.
I'd agree with that.
For a design like this.
Yeah, I would say it's sort of 50s, 60s, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a little bit on the early side for the design brief, I think. This one, is it really a race car, or is it just a really wild street car from like the late 70s sort of wedgie era?
Yes, I quite like the design. I think it's got something going about it, but I totally agree. This is not a race car. And it's also got 2 seats. This is something that a few of the cars have multiple seats. Now, if it's a rally car, fine, but no race cars have 2 seats. But yeah, this feels to me like a fast road car.
To me, it was doing the race car thing by basically showing its design flaw for engine cooling, which is that you basically can't. And they had to rip open the entire back, which houses the engine, and put massive fans on top as well, which you see on the inside when you go to the straight back view. And I think that's a somewhat appealing prospect there, that you took this car, which somehow which I think has for a road car a really iconic look, and then you try to make a race car out of it, and it just falls flat technically. This has some kind of oddball appeal to me.
Yeah, I really liked the details of when you look in the back and you see all the fans and what's going on. And like, is that an engine in the back?
I believe it would be mid-engine. I don't think it's actually. It's hard to tell, actually. I mean, it could be mid-engine. It could be front engine. I mean, it's got a great big long nose on it, so it could go either way.
But it doesn't have much cooling at the front, so I would guess that this is supposed to be a rear-engined or mid-engine car.
Yeah. I think so.
Definitely.
It's a fun design. Like, it's interesting. It's different. Like, it is a bit of a mix of different styles. Not so different styles, but like different car. I can see sort of some different cars in it. Lots of DeLorean vibes, actually.
I was just thinking that myself, is that this is very strongly influenced by the DeLorean, even down to the paint that kind of is reminiscent of the stainless steel finish.
Yep. Is it a DeLorean mixed with a CRX? Which is kind of states on the side there.
Yeah, it's kind of a DeLorean mixed with a C4 Corvette from the 80s.
Yeah, I think
that's true.
Yeah, it's
some serious Corvette in it.
It's a great design. That I mean, I especially like that wide taillight band sort of up high in the rear. That's a neat feature. And this is the kind of car you'd love to see on the road in like an 80s sci-fi or action film. But is it a race car? I don't think so, unfortunately. This one's kind of cool, and I like it because it's so very different from all the other finalists, in that somebody actually tried to do like a rally car or like a rally raid type of car.
This is super cool. I saw this one and was like, okay, and this is not my final opinion on any of this stuff, but I was like, I wouldn't, off the bat, I was like, I wouldn't expect something like this to win. But then the more I look at it, I'm like, you know what? This is pretty cool though. Like, lots of the details, lots of the design elements. They've really put together like the whole car seems to fit together. Like, I like this one.
And it seems so functional when you look at it. It's like designed with the purpose always straight in front of your nose.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the kind of car that you can imagine, doing the Dakar rally back in, say, probably the late 70s, early 80s, before things really got crazy with the wild off-roaders and, the 959s and all that. Cars like this were common in that kind of racing at the time. And this is perfect.
It takes me back, like, to that sort of vibe, for sure.
Yeah, same here. Also, color theme, just spot on. And is that a Finnish name on the side for the driver? Not quite sure. Oh no, there was the sponsor there. But overall, it's so thoroughly designed and well crafted in all its details as well. And at the same time, it's so well crafted, but also feels like it is a little run down. And that's not just the little crack in the the windshield that does it, but it just feels used already. And I think that thematically fits so nicely to this car. It wants to be used.
Yeah, I can picture this in a small, like, Italian town or whatever, ragging around some corners, completely covered in dust and bits falling off and whatever. Like, I can see that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. It has that feel of the classic rally car, and of course with thousands of people standing around the hairpin corner watching this thing just whipping around and cheering madly and trying to get the photograph standing out in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
The design here on the rear, I think only really works because of the sponsors there. Otherwise you end up with something that is looking quite barren if you don't have a number plate there, and don't have the equipment down low for the additional exhaust or whatever that is, and so it just fits for its purpose here. This design, it just makes it whole. But yeah, I think the back, there's something missing there for me. Just tiny nitpicking, but I think there's something missing.
Yeah. The badges and stuff don't feel like they're in quite. If that is a badge, I don't know whether it's a badge, or the Renault Strid or whatever it is. Like, it feels like there should be something in the middle somewhere.
Yes. It actually feels like it's missing the badge proper, and that's just the brand name that's been relocated. And yeah, the lettering is a little bit off. It's not very well balanced, and you can actually see it's a little bit of errors in the spacing and stuff. Of course, that's just very minor nitpicks. And one thing I'd just like to touch on briefly here is the inclusion of the rear defroster screen, which is in the automation community. I mean, we've talked about it in some of our other judging videos. This is one of the most controversial things you can put in a car. And if you want to get our community wound up and arguing with one another, you just mention, hey, should I put a rear defroster screen on my design? And you'll get very angry and very passionate arguments on both sides.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I like it. And I think the sort of ghetto-ness of the stickers and whatnot not being quite right absolutely fits in with the car. Like, no, these stickers are not going to be applied correctly. Like,
oh, you're right. Yes, they are a little bit off tilt, and that would actually fit. Yeah. One question, gentlemen, and that is, is that on the right-hand side, where close to the wing mirror, is that a light that... Okay. Like a tank light? Like a real proper big one that just illuminates and blinds everyone?
I think it kind of has to be, yeah. Yeah, it's... I mean, I don't... What it is this person is repurposed one of the base fixtures for a driver's side mirror and just turned it forward. So I'm assuming it is either some sort of a light. It's not an intake because I'll just scroll back here, but this one has a snorkel on the other side. So it has to be some kind of a light, I think.
It's very odd. I think of all the bits about the design, that is the one I like the least. Like, I don't know whether I've ever seen anything like that on an actual car. Maybe that has, but it does feel odd.
And that was my thought initially when I saw it as well. I was like, well, that looks a little bit weird. Even to the point that I thought that maybe when this person submitted their car, something had gone wrong with their submission. And, oh no, that thing got turned around and it shouldn't have been. So, but then I looked at some of the pictures that they took of the car prior to this, and oh no, it's there as well. So that was an intentional choice. I'm an absolute sucker for Group C and IMSA GTP cars.
Yes, me too. However, see, I saw this and was just like, ooh, yeah. And then, like, yeah, but you kind of just copied what exists. It's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, doesn't feel necessarily unique.
It is a very faithful reproduction, but it's, I think some of it as well is a body, like all the cars start off as like a base body with a shape that in this case is pure 1980s Group C, and some of them are a little bit more versatile in how you can change the shape and make it not really look like what it started out as and what it's intended to be. And this is a body that, even though it's undergone a lot of changes recently, it's always only really going to look like an 80s prototype car. And there's only so much and so far you can get around that.
To me, this car also, to mirror what Sam said, is extremely faithful. It instantly looks wow. But then, as you point out, there is no creativity here in terms of vision. It is a replica, more or less. And what I find very interesting is how mundane the car would look, if you even could say that about a Group C car, without all the excellent placements of sponsors. And a glimpse of that we get when we get to the straight from the rear view, where oddly enough there is absolutely nothing in terms of sponsorship there. I can't see a single thing in this from this angle, which really confused me. And I think this makes the design overall, or the vision of the design, which I think the person making this had, much less consistent as well.
Yeah, I get you on that. Like, when you look at all of the other angles, it's like sponsor central, boom, 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 boom. And then you get to the rear, like you say, there's nothing. And there wouldn't be anything if you went lower, eventually if you got above. But yeah, that is odd that there's nothing there. And I wasn't sure, although actually looking through it slightly less so, about the sort of slats in the back. They sort of work, but I'm not 100% sure they align correctly with the sort of the rest of the design and the rest of the slats and stuff in the car. It's a sort of similar vibe, but that's real nitpicking, I think, on that. It looks cool.
Oh, it's undoubtedly very cool. But I agree with what both of you said, is that you go to the rear and it just feels like it's... I mean, cars of this era had sponsors on every angle, and you'd have sponsorship on the sort of the red panel where the lights and those vents would be. Even if it's just like little minor sponsors, there'd be still something there. But it just feels like it got overlooked, I guess.
Ran out of time. Couldn't do the back. Sorry. The sticker application took too long.
Yeah.
Gotta get the car out the door. These are wild. This is like a Trans Am style silhouette car.
I I don't know much about these cars in terms of this era of racing. To me, this doesn't feel like that thing I was talking about before. Like a different person's designed the front to the person that's designed the back, and like it's got these sort of flowing shapes and then some really hard. Yeah, I don't know. It feels to me really disjointed. But then I know some of the Trans Am cars at that period were really weird as well. But yeah, it doesn't quite gel.
Yeah, to jump off of that, I agree with that sentiment. And what I noticed is that the underlying base car is of a boxy style. And then the front aero kit put on there, but not to the corners where the actual corners of the car are, is very rounded, while the aero kit in the back isn't. And then the wings, again, are rounded, instead of the boxy shapes that you then would expect. And it is a little bit of a hodgepodge of design choices here in terms of shapes that just don't quite match.
Yeah.
If I may jump in about the wings, the rear wing especially, there's a couple things that I've noticed is, number one, it's significantly wider than the car is, which is generally not allowed in any racing series in terms of legality. Certainly in a lot of the sort of GT type, you'll often see that the wings are generally not wider than there's usually a prescribed part of the bodywork that I believe they can't be wider than.
Yes.
My big issue is that wing is kind of an anachronism. Like, we've got a very obviously sort of 70s car with a 1990s style wing on it.
Yeah.
But in terms of the livery, though, I mean, this is exactly like what you'd expect a mid-70s Trans Am car to look like. I mean, they got the paint and the style and the sponsorship, like, absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed here too, I would like to hear you comment on it, is from the side view, it does have a very interesting, weird, like, stance, almost like standing on its toes, and that would just be not faring well for any kind of aerodynamics for ground effect and whatnot. This doesn't seem functional.
The rake of the car is the opposite of what one would expect, and it seems to get lower as it gets further back, and the rear wheels almost look, I think they are the same size as the front, which in itself isn't quite right. On a car like that, you'd want massive rear wheels.
It does feel like it would, certainly with the way that it's sitting on the ground right now, that it would just, you get any significant speed on it, the car would just go nose. There'd be no weight on the nose. It would be almost undrivable at speed, I think. Of course, there might be things going on that we can't really see or that. You know, it's, as they always say about aerodynamics, you know, what looks right isn't necessarily what is right. So maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt in that regard.
Yeah. I like this one. Immediately, I don't know, something about it, the way it's rendered as well. It looks really glossy. Now, is that just...
I think some of that's down to the lighting, some of it's down to the choice of... One of the things our players can do is they can actually choose a lot of the parameters about their paint, you know, whether it's really glossy or more towards the matte side of things. This car I think has the gloss turned right up to 100.
Yeah.
I think one of the instant appeals I got from this one is that it's somehow a little cute and chubby, and it does look like, I believe, what it's trying to be as well, and that is kind of an instructor-student vehicle, because it's a two-seater and it's definitely a race car, and this seems like a kind of practice car.
Oh no, this
looks like a Can-Am.
That's exactly my thought. This is a pure Can-Am car.
But why two seats then?
Well, this is a good question. Why two seats?
I'm not 100% sure on the rules of Can-Am, but I seem to understand that they had a rule. I think they even had it at Le Mans at the time, that they had to have, quote-unquote, two seats in the car.
Oh, really? Okay.
Even if one of the seats was just kind of vestigial, it would never be used and never even be usable. They still, I think that rule even continued for a long time at Le Mans. That they actually, it had to be at least in theory, a two-seater.
I don't think, I know what you mean. You get lots of like right or left-hand drive cars.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever had a seat in them.
I think it really varied from year to year and certainly era to era. I'm just trying to think back to like, especially pictures like the 917 and the Ferrari 512. Like they probably just have like a molded fiberglass sort of bucket that looked like a seat, and then they could go to the French organizers and say, there, it's got two seats in it, even though nobody would ever be able to sit in it because it's, they'd have electronics and fuse boxes and fuel pumps and whatnot, and where the passenger would ostensibly be. So I don't know if that's what they were going for here, but this definitely has like a Can-Am feel, and those cars were wild back then. Like this is, everybody always talks about, I'd love to see a race car series that had no rules. Well, this was the series.
Yeah. Crazy lightweight. Well, pretty much no structure to the cars whatsoever. Crazy horsepower figures. They were like 8, 9,000, 1,200 horsepower, weren't they? Like crazy things, I think, towards the end.
And 1970s tires.
I do like the intake of that one right behind there. Even though I would wonder, from the profile view, I think it looks absolutely perfect there. But would you expect it to be a bit more rounded with the rest of the shape of the car, implying that you go for more rounded shapes in general, apart from the cut off, like very strictly limited rear wing?
It's honestly, I think if you removed that, it would look better.
Yeah, that's kind of the one flaw I see in the car is it's just, the reason why you have the stacks is you can get completely unrestricted access to intake air, and then you just go and slap a restriction on it with a...
But would it be a restriction if you get overpressure in there because of the when you are at speed? You would create a little bit of an overpressure in there, which then would be sucked up by the trumpets, and you get slightly better volumetric efficiency, wouldn't you?
Maybe.
It's possible, yeah. That's what.
But are you limiting the airflow?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
I don't know. I don't know the answer, to be honest. One thing that they've done on this car that I thought was slightly odd is. And overall, I'm a big fan of this one. But from the rear, they've enclosed the rear wheels.
Right.
You just never do on a race car, especially this sort of era. You would never see that ever. They would be chopped out, and you'd be looking right at the rear tires.
Yeah, I mean, even then, with their limited knowledge of aerodynamics, they knew that was very important to keep the rear wheels as exposed as possible, because you get a lot of high pressure air in there and it really affects how the car sits on the road at speed.
Right, this is quite a fun one. Now, I'm slightly unsure. What actually would this race in? Because there's part of me that was like, that could be a rally car. A small part.
I think a car like this would be, back in the day, they used to have like the S-classes, the sports class at Le Mans, like the 2-liter, the 3-liter cars, where Porsche would race. Well, Porsche is a prime example. They'd have like the 904s and the 96s and 910s. I think this would be a car in that category.
Yep. Yeah.
What instantly strikes me with this one is how damn photogenic it is. Like any angle for this one just works. It is not such that it's a super wow car from any angle either, but it just feels like a poster car.
Yeah. I think the angle that I'm least like is the side profile. I think the side profile, I don't know whether it's because, it's probably also because it's a slightly high angle and I can see really quite far into the car. Like the wheels don't look like, don't seem to be in arches.
No, you're destroying my beautiful vision I had of this car.
Just needs to have a bit more weight put in it and then it'll be fine.
Fat driver.
One thing I will say about this car is, like, it's very obviously a French car. They got the French racing blue, like, spot on.
Yeah, yeah.
The color is perfect.
The little periscope thing on the top, what's that doing?
That is for getting all the heat out of the race cabin. It's probably a little oversized, but that is a feature that I've seen on race cars because it's just getting so unbelievably hot in there that you wanted to have some fresh air in there. But this looks like a bit too much of a snorkel.
Yeah, I think usually what they do is they'd actually, instead of having an intake, they'd have more of an exhaust. Like, on the back of the roof, they might have a backwards-facing aqueduct or something to just pull the hot air out and then just let cool air sort of get in however. I'm not 100% convinced on the rear wing on a car like this. Because in Europe, like if you study racing history, this is, more for the viewers, there's a very definite cutoff between no wings and then when wings suddenly were on every race car. And it's right around about 1969, 1970, and it's a very sudden change, and I'm not really convinced that a car of this body style would have a wing on this.
Also, this looks like a more modern wing, doesn't it?
Reminds me of a Maserati MC12.
It kind of does a little bit, just much, much older. Yeah.
Yeah, just the sort of wing and the way that interacts with the back of the car.
How would you think it would have looked if there was just a little spoiler lip kind of thing that bounces the air off right at the tip of the car there?
Oh, like
It would look better.
Yeah, like a little gurney flap would be perfect on there, especially if it was like plastic or steel. Just looks like something has been completely hacked on at the last minute because they had their car at Le Mans and they saw, oh, everybody else is doing this. Why aren't we doing it? And then they
nice 90-degree angle.
Exactly.
I have to say though, from the front, I really like it with the wing.
Yeah, it's nicely framing it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just one comment on something subtle. If you go back to to any quarter view, the choice of the trim color in the wheels is really nicely color contrasting to the chosen main color of the car, the blue. So slightly messing, bronzy color there towards the blue. I think that's a very nice highlight for the choice. It's subtle, and I think that was a really good choice.
Yeah. Another thing on this car that I quite liked is all of the little vents and stuff all kind of work together, including like the mesh at the rear and the little sort of 5 slots next to it and stuff like that. Like, they all work. Whereas on some you get a bit of a mix of different styles.
This is a very Australian kind of, what was that series they ran in Australia before the V8 supercars? That was just like the biggest thing there, and everybody seemingly in the country was a fan of it. That's what one of these is.
To me, it looks a bit like a NASCAR. But yeah, actually, as a design, I think it fits reasonably well together as one complete thing. Like you look at it and go like, yeah, this is what it is. And you look at it from a different angle, like, yeah, getting the same vibe. Not sure about the little lip at the bottom on the front. I don't really know what that is doing. Maybe it's some cooling or something.
It kind of does look like sort of an auxiliary intake for, I don't know, combination of brake cooling and more radiator or oil cooler or something. I don't think it's like an aerodynamic lip per se.
Yeah, it would definitely make use of that air. It doesn't have an additional hood scoop or anything. So getting a bit more air than through that reasonably closed off grill that you see there, I think does make sense. And brake cooling, I'm not sure if you need quite that much. Oh, well, unless were they using drum brakes at that point? They probably didn't, right? I hope not. So
this looks like it. This does not look like a disc brake car, though.
No, it doesn't. I agree with that, but it's too scary to think of this not being a disc brake car. One thing that I really do like is the graphics on the side. I think that's really tasteful with the bend around towards the rear, giving the car a lot more shape there. If that was missing, it would look really dull towards the tail end.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And the way it kind of follows the body line too. You really see it more in the rear three-quarter view when it kind of sort of tapers and follows the line of the hood and the trunk, and also it's hard to see, but there's actually a body line that runs just along the top of the red section along the door, and then it kind of tapers down towards the tail light. They've actually done a really good job of sort of accentuating the lines on the car with their livery.
I'm not 100% set on the 2 horizontal lines on the back that sort of join the tail lights.
Yeah, from the back it doesn't look like a race car, does it?
But it's got your tacked on gurney flap.
Yeah, finally I got it. I found it in a different car. Your princess is in a different castle. What I did like here is the how prominent, despite it obviously being slightly hidden, the roll cage is on the inside. It's quite nice and shiny, and it pulls the eye towards an interior that seems very fitting.
Yeah, the interior, this is really good. I mean, we did say, of course, to the community that we're not actually going to mark cars on the interiors unless they were like an open-top car, but this is, if we were to dig into it, I think it would be quite special. And the detail that, especially when you look at they've gone to the trouble of making all the little holes in the sort of the structure that goes up in front of the front windshield to lighten it. So a lot of work and a lot of detail and effort was put into this. And it's those little subtle touches that really sort of bring this to life.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of little bits when you look closer that you're like, okay, someone's thought about this. They've put a bit of effort in there, or a lot of effort.
Yeah. Something that is many, many hours of monotonous moving little things around by hand. So props to them for doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Is this a road version of a race car? Why aren't there sponsors on there? And how is this special after what we have already seen and know?
I think I really like this, but I totally get your point about, is it a road car? And maybe it is a road car.
You know what this reminds me of, and this unfortunately takes it well out of the era, is like the Dower 962. Sort of that basically that they took all the old Porsche 962 prototype cars because they're suddenly illegal to use in racing. And they made a quote-unquote road car version of it so that they could homologate it and then continue to race it for another couple years. And I think it was 1993 or 1994, sort of as they were undergoing a really big change of rules at Le Mans. And this feels a lot like that kind of a car, where...
Yeah, that sort of vibe. I'm trying to think what I've seen that has that back. There's some race car that has that sort of back to it. I can't for the life of me remember what it is.
I know, it feels very familiar.
It does, but I don't know what it is. This was the one where I was like, I feel like I've seen that before, but I cannot place it in any way.
I do love the proportions of this one, and the flow in general. It's beautiful shape, and I think this is when we think of being in the future, like another 30 years even, they would probably classify this shape as having stood the test of time more so than our 50 years 40 years of looking back at something like this, 30 to 40 years. And just this super flowy teardrop long tail of it really works well with the light setup and the massive wing coming up out of it. And yeah, I really like aesthetically, it's very pleasing.
Yeah,
the way they did the tail lights especially, it's hard to put my finger on exactly what I like about it, but I just look at how the design of the rear and I think that's just right.
What's that that modern Porsche 996 GT1.
It does kind of have that feel of like a.
Is that it? Is that what I'm thinking of?
It feels
Most recent one.
or more like actually, I was thinking more Mercedes, like the CLK GTR or the CLR, like that really long low tail.
Yeah.
It kind of has that 90s feel to it, which I think that's maybe my biggest criticism with this is it's kind of touched on, is that it does feel a little bit too modern for the 85 cutoff. It's beautiful otherwise.
It is cool though.
I just looked at it now and realized it's got a license plate on it, so it really is a road car.
Oh, true. Yes, of course. The obvious thing is being missed. Yes.
This one's really classic, sort of mid to late 60s prototype racer.
Yeah, what is it? P45? Is that the one? That
Yeah.
sort of area?
Exactly. Like, this would be what the Ford GT would have raced against. Or Ford GT40,
Yeah.
I should say.
Yeah. I think this is a bit like that one very early on, where I looked at it and went like, ooh, and then started looking at it a bit more and was like, I'm not sure about this slight mishmash of different shapes, like super boxy rear with really flowy front.
And I found the design of the side vents to be also quite inconsistent. That took a little bit out of that for me as well. You have 3 different shapes there going on for the different intakes and necker ducts, and it also this one certainly doesn't have a problem with rake. It's more akin to a vacuum cleaner for the road.
Yeah, it's definitely got a very steep rake on it. I don't know if they really even did that a whole lot in era. I don't think they realized the benefits back in the 1960s just yet.
Does the front look a little fishy to you as well?
It does kind of have that
a little bit.
Does kind of have that 4th generation Catfish Camaro look to it, with the big wide grille and widely spaced headlights. Like it's a bottom feeder.
Right. Yes.
I love the side mirrors, just how they're tiny little pods, just almost hidden away from the air.
Yeah, I like that. And that feels very sort of, although saying that, do we have a front view? Can you see out of the side mirrors? Yeah, maybe actually. Maybe.
Yeah.
I wondered if the back was wider. No, I was just going to say overall, like it's an interesting design, but it seems a bit like, especially from the side. Back less so. It just seems like it's a bit odd.
I would add that it is maybe also odd in a little bit of an exciting way with this, like, obviously mismatched back. It seems like that it is a bit of a design statement being made. It's like, yeah, you get this race car and then slap in the face, like, bam, here you go. This is a really brutal rear that is otherwise being joined with a quite elegant, apart from like smaller inconsistent features, very flowery race car. And that does have an appeal to me. It's like it's combining this mixed messaging in a quite aggressive way, which I think suits a race car in some ways.
Yeah, I like how the sort of rear wing extends back over the back of the car, like further, and I sort of wonder what it would look like if you extended the sides as well. Like just had a little bit more of that back detailing continuing further back, so it sort of wasn't so just chop off. It had a bit more depth to it. That might be interesting.
Agreed. I think, like, even if you just had the sort of a bit of an angle from the very tip of that wing right to where the bodywork ends at the bottom, that would look really sharp, I think. This is just a wild, mad creation.
I like this.
Yeah, it's great.
And what I first thought when I saw this is Audi Quattro. And then I looked up the Wikipedia page for it, and it had the exact same color theme. And it was like, oh shit, okay, yeah. But then there's, at the first glance, it was, oh yeah, this is the kind of the same thing. No, it is not. This has a lot of unique design features to it, which are definitely inspired by some of that Audi Quattro look, but it does its own thing too.
Yeah, and I saw it's a car, and this is probably a great thing to say about it, isn't it? You look at it and you go like, I feel like I've seen that before, but actually maybe I haven't. And actually it just nails what it's aiming to be without being a direct copy.
Exactly. Like this is, I mean, you're always going to be taking work from other people in car design and whatnot, but the idea is you take it and make it your own, and that's exactly what this is. And the interesting thing too is I'm imagining this is from the Japanese, what was it called, Super Touring GT at the time, back in the.
Is that it? Yeah,
80s.
I knew there was some series.
Yeah, this is where this car would come from for sure. Of course, this is what inspired all those Bosozoku cars that came later on. You know, they mimicked that style as sort of a parody of. Well, this whole culture of that goes into those cars. That's really quite fascinating, and a lot of it is based in race cars of this style of this era.
Is this like in 1980?
It would be 1980s, sort of early to mid, basically right at the time when Japan was sort of at their peak of the automotive industry, and it's like they just couldn't do anything wrong. And the racing series really kind of reflected that. That was like this was kind of like Japanese. It's hard to.
So I'm looking it up, and if you look up super silhouette Formula cars, they look a lot like this.
Doing that right now, and yes, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of inspiration to find, and if there is the silver super silhouette from 1983. If you look at that one, I think that is probably pretty close to a replica of it.
Yes. It is, isn't it? Same number.
Yep.
Spin it around a bit. Okay, I'm looking for the back. It's very similar. It's the same car, isn't it? It's not quite, but like.
So you have seen it before, and the answer is it's the silver super silhouette by Nissan.
Like, are those some with the wheels in this software, is that like a standard set of wheels that you customize, or can you make your own wheels and things?
We have, basically it's the wheels kind of come as is. I mean, you can actually mod in new types of wheels, but once you actually select your set of wheels, basically all your options are is just changing size. You can change how much dish the wheels have, and certain parts of the wheels that have different paint groups. So you can, like in this one, like the centers of the wheels are painted that dark gray, and the actual rim itself is chrome. So, I mean, you have a fair bit of customization, but you aren't fully able to customize wheels beyond just like, I like that set, put them on my car.
And to build this car, have they started with a normal sort of saloon type coupe thing or whatever, and then built out all of the bodywork?
Yes. That is a massive amount of work to get here. Especially with that interior as well. It's crazy.
Yeah, and the finished look is like spot on. Like all the bodywork and everything looks great.
I just love all the little aerodynamic sort of quote unquote improvements, like the veins along the hood and up the A-pillars.
Yeah.
That's so cool and so period too. It's exactly what they'd be doing just to experiment and try to get that extra little 100th of a second per lap.
Yeah. the crossed out lights because you don't need them.
Yep.
Yeah, in the interior as well. Yeah, you can see that it's on the seat, it's on all sorts. There's a serious amount of detail gone into this, but a pretty much direct copy of a real car.
Yes. So creativity score will be. Yeah. How do we deal with this, Chris? Because this is too close to the original, which we found out now. Does it get hammered in the creativity score?
It's got to.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, you have to take some points off for sure. But on the other hand, the creativity isn't just, at least in my mind, it isn't just, is it a copy of a real car? It's, are they using the resources available in automation to actually design something really cool and unique? So in a way, I feel like they kind of balance out. Like, I mean, if I was just looking at it strictly from, is this a copy of a real car? I would definitely just hammer it in the voting. But with all the work that they put in and all the little touches they have, it kind of comes back maybe not quite as high as it would be if you were just looking at it from, they've taken all the effort to get all the little details down, and they're using things in a sort of a smart and clever way. So.
But I think that's probably, and that will probably differentiate. I don't know quite how the scoring is going to work with all our different scores, but like, we're all going to see it in a different way. So we're all going to score them in a slightly different way. And like, I'm definitely going to go back and look at my scores and see if I've sort of missed anything or whatever. But I've not been looking at it in a, well, actually, what have they done to create this kind of way or anything? I'm just looking at the finished product versus the sort of tick boxes. But I can totally see, like this, the level of effort, detail to take it from probably what it looked like to start with to this is extreme. But on the flip side, you are creating something else, that you're not creating something original.
You're still finding, I think the point that Chris is making also is that you're still creative in the solutions that are needed to get to the final result. That is a very creative process. But yes, the vision itself wasn't creative. And that concludes this category. A big thanks to our guest for joining us, and thank you for watching. Check out the links below and subscribe to the channel to not miss any of the competition videos.